Hi, everyone. Hopefully, a few people are tuning in. It looks like Jessica is tuning in already. Um, I'm Monica Stephenson, and I am the founder of Anza Gems and a collaborator with Moyo Gems. And Susan Wheeler is also here. She is founder of Susan Wheeler Design, but also a gem sort of co-founder as well for Virtue Gems. And then Hewan Zewdi of Agari Treasures. And we're kind of going to share a few stories about what we learned at the mines is the topic of conversation here. Yeah, and if Jess wants to come up on stage, she's welcome to as well, because she actually runs Nomad Jeweler, which is a service that will take people to mining communities and go visit mines. So I know she's been to Sri Lanka, she's been to Kenya, so she definitely has that experience as well. We thought, I think a lot of people have this idea that like mines maybe look a certain way or function a certain way. And I think some of the time those impressions are maybe not even perfectly correct. And it depends on where in the world you are and what kind of mine you are actually sort of faced with. It can vary wildly across the globe. And I think that I've come across a few, maybe, I don't know, just different assumptions and maybe even misconceptions. And I thought, actually, I think Susan had this idea of like, maybe we should tell people what we have found, what our experiences have been. And it might just kind of help broaden people's perception a little bit. Because there are some things that are surprising when you go visit, particularly artisanal mines in some of these regions. And there are some things that I think are really hard-won knowledge that I've gained from some of these visits. I've been to my first experience. Great, Jessica's joining us. My first mine experience was actually, yay! Hi, Jessica. Everyone can kind of introduce themselves when they have a moment to speak. But my whole gem journey kind of started at the edge of a Savarite mine in Kenya, and the whole thing was really quite surprising, including maybe just the remoteness of it and just getting there. You know, it's a 36-hour plane journey just to East Africa, and then there's another either short flight or 8-hour drive to the nearest town closest to the Tanga, Tanzania mining region. And then from there, it's another 3 to 6 hours on roads to get to the actual mining villages, the actual mines. And so I think a lot of people in their head really are thinking kind of the imagery that we've seen from large open pit like diamond mines, for instance. So some people have that impression in their head that it's really large, that it's somewhat mechanized, that it's like this giant like pit in the ground, or maybe they have the impression that it's like more of like what I've seen from Sri Lanka, which is like a little scaffolding, and then you have a hole that just goes straight down. Or I've also had people say, well, what about when they pan in the river? And I'm like, there's no rivers like where we go, right? Like, again, people have imagery in their heads from various like media and a lot of what gets play is like large scale mine sort of, photographs or media. So in this case, what I found was like, there's a lot of red dirt, beautiful landscape, amazing people, and they're using, in many cases, like farm tools, farm implements, sometimes broken, like to just manually be digging holes in the ground. That's what it looks like kind of in East Africa where I have visited. The idea that you have deep holes in the ground, or you have PPE, people wearing headlamps and helmets, work boots, that doesn't really exist as much in this particular region. So that was surprising to me, just what the landscape looked like, what the conditions are. And then sometimes there's jackhammers, sometimes there's excavators, but usually if there's an excavator, in my opinion, in my experience, it's usually off to the side, it's not being used, it's broken, or they don't have the money for petrol to actually run the equipment. But there's some other things, that are surprising. For me, it was like discovering there's this whole ecosystem of like, they have a hierarchy at the mines, and there is some structure, there is some order in trading as well, not just the mining industry, but the actual like actual trading. Many of these people are very open to using PPE if they had access to it, or they had education to know why they should be using it. And many of them are also very, like, they don't want their children to work in the mines. They don't want their children maybe to even enter the mining industry, right? Like, they would love for their kids to be getting an education. They want those opportunities for themselves and also for their children. So it can be surprising to go. It's really an incredible experience. Even if you were to go to a mine in the US, I would say do it, go for it. It really gives you an appreciation for how incredibly hard they're working, moving literally mountains of dirt or rock for a few little crystals that you can hold in the palm of your hand. So that's kind of my experience. I'm sure others have either different experiences or other things to add to that. But that's kind of my first experience, and obviously it made an impression, because here I am 6 years later, 15 trips later, probably seen at least 5 mines each of those visits. So you can kind of do the math. So clearly it made an impression.
Great. Well, I'll go ahead a little bit. I haven't visited a lot of mines. I think, and I asked Jessica to come on because she did the mine tours in Kenya, and she's visited a lot more mines than me. But we have visited 2 mines together that were really different, or 2 mining regions, and that's we both were on the Fair Mine trip in Colombia. And, totally different than I think everything else we're going to talk about here is around mines in, in different countries in Africa. But it was really different. I mean, not gold and gems aside. There's a difference when, when we walked into these craft code certified mines, that you could stand up. There was ventilation, there was electricity, there were safety rooms off the side. Like, if we could have lived in that safety room for, 5 days or something. I mean, I had no qualms about walking into those mines. It was in a lot of them, this is just by nature that they were built into a hillside, that you couldn't see them sometimes. And it looked like you were just, the environment was still there, which of course, some of those hillsides in Colombia look like honeycombs. So that's not a great situation either. But it's very different, mine in different continents, but mine to mine, it's very different. And when we went to, Jessica did the trip in Voi in Kenya. And when we went there, it was, the safety standards were different. The mines you were not walking to those mines. Some of them you were crawling into, and they were tunnels off of pits. There's so much I learned visiting those mines. I think I'll let everyone else talk a little bit too, but I think a lot about, because I've done safety equipment drives at the Chicago Responsible Jewelry Conference. We've done them that have ended up with Moyo in Tanzania, where Monica's worked with a lot of those miners, and in Kenya. And we always think about, we want hard hats. Everyone wants to give hard hats. And then what we really had a demand for was boots. And so I get it. I mean, Monica, you talk a lot about, people mining in sandals. I mean, not only the safety of your feet, but one of the mine stories I always think about is I have from Virtue Gem, we have a couple of women who really just are not going to deal with snakes anymore. And why do people want boots? Walking on the way to the mines, I mean, Margaret in Malawi, she's like, I won't walk to the mines. I mean, she's, has a big mine and she's pretty established as a woman miner. She always walks with, people walk with her, or she has a driver, because she's like, I saw a snake. I'm afraid of snakes. And we had Justine in Zambia also. She's like, oh, you want to hear a story about the mine? Well, there's this snakes, and I won't go out at this time because of the snakes. I mean, this stuff that we don't think about, like, what are the dangers of mines? Getting trampled by an elephant at night. Like, we don't think about those. What are these? I would have no idea that, I would want boots to walk to a mine if there were snakes out. I would want to have boots. It's stuff that we don't realize. So I think that, what you learn at the mine is something, to me, it's always, there's a lot of things that we don't expect or we don't think about. So
one mining camp had metal frame beds that were a little bit elevated precisely because of snakes. Like, they couldn't climb the metal frame bed as easily as other, or just a mattress on the floor. So and we saw at that same mine, we saw a scorpion several dead scorpions like that big. So there are hazards, like not just the rock or the tunnel or and those can present hazards as well. I wanted to show, this is a photo of Bahati, one of the Moyo miners who received the PPE from the Chicago Responsible Jewelry Conference, and she's using it the last mine visit. So it does make a difference. You can't just leave hard hats. You can't just leave steel-toed boots, because if they don't know why they should wear them, it will go unworn. It's hotter. It inhibits their movement. That in many cases, the entrance to the mine is really on purpose for security reasons, not like a well-trod path, right? So they go down in their bare feet because they can feel the ground, and they can really, they are able to enter and exit really, really quickly. But that doesn't mean that they wouldn't want to keep all their toes, right? So if we can, you need to have education as well as the equipment is what I've sort of learned from this region.
I want to just, not that I'm the moderator or anything, but Hewan, did you grow up going to mines? What was your first mine visit, being, Ethiopian and living in Ethiopia? What was your first mine visit?
So actually, I did not grow up in the mine site, or at the time I was growing, Ethiopia did not even know we have minerals. So in Ethiopia, it's just a recent discovery. And I mean, you can see it on the record of gemology and everything. We didn't have, maybe 50, 60 or 100 years ago, there might be, but most Ethiopian gemstones are discovered in recent years, within 10 years, to the current ones to 3 to 4 years. So my first, I've been in the US for the past 16 years. So I barely went back and forth. And the last few years after I started the business and get involved with the gemstone business, with the miners. So this is my last trip, was the 7 months I stayed in the long time. So my first visit was, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, when we went to the first discovery of emerald, which is in the southern part of Ethiopia. I did not go all the way down to because it requires certain male to go in there, and you need to walk after, traveling by bus, 8 hours or something. And then you have to use a motorbike or a horse to go in there. And it's terrifying. I was so scared. I mean, we had another family member who does. It's not only the mine site. What's usually is different based on the minerals you're resourcing, the gemstone you're resourcing, the landscape, the natural geographical. All those, it makes it different in every region and every site. So that was my first visit. And currently, when I was in Ethiopia, I went to, due to the COVID, I wasn't, and then we have some conflict in the country, I wasn't able to reach most of it. But I went the one close by to Addis Ababa, the city. So they're like, where I actually surprisingly found out about, and I was really curious to go visit recently, the Blue Chalcedony discovery is very close to the city. And it's like pretty much, I never expected to be like, I thought it's going to be like the south where the emerald mine is, really like, and red dust, and where you can sleep out and they have to dig really down the hole. And this is completely different, a different site. Things are, the agates are the chalcedonies are around and like, close to the water area. And it's like a big abundant supply quartz, and like you can just walk around. They just have to dig just a little bit out. And that's the current one I seen. And the past 2-3 years went to the Wello areas. That's when the most scariest too. That's a mountain. And usually the we were able to visit from further, not going to closer due to restriction of licensing. If you're not a miner, you cannot access there unless you are going accompanied with the government. So that is one of the scariest one I seen. It's a huge mountain. It's a vein. They have to go. It's a 1 meter. And I've talked to the miners. They say to go inside there, they have to hold, a light torch in their mouths, and they have to crawl. This is like 1 meter. And then let alone, hats, some of them they don't have, it can fall on them. People died, have lost a lot of life in that mine site. And the way they dig it out, it's really in a small, the different, literally it's a vein to go through under the mountain. And it's not as many women are even allowed to go inside. Women assist outside the mine site. It's very strictly forbidden for women to get in there due to so many reasons. Physically, assault, it's dark, they can lose their torchlights, and some people, they don't know even how to come back out. And now that's been, been restricted and restructured by mining engineers, how to dig and those things to do. So it's different, place to place. And I notice all these miners, and every mine area is a totally different landscape, different geographical, the risk factors is different, and what their needs are different. And like having the PPE is a basic needs for every miners and any artisanal miners. And that, like, usually we expect like to see, like Monica said, big dozers, and those are not where our miners are around. They're artisanal miners, they're small scale miners. Some people, they have to walk a day, just to get into the site. No transportation, they have to walk. No water accesses. I work with some women, lapidarists, miners who work around inside there. So it's kind of like a whole different story you see in every different site.
And that's just one region. That's just one country, right? Like, and same like in Tanzania or Kenya, like the Tanzanite mines are very different, which I've been into, are very different than some of the alluvial mines that are located in like northern Tanzania in the Tonga region. But Jessica, I'm curious about your experiences. And I love the fact that we're all women who've like, I didn't really think about the fact that we wouldn't even be allowed in some mines or at some sites, but that's a really interesting point.
It would be bad luck too.
You cannot enter the mine site. I mean, inside, there is a lot of risk factors. They don't want you to. You can be outside the mine site, but it's mostly for safety reasons, pretty much.
Yeah, so my first mine experience was actually in Brazil. I had the opportunity to visit 3 mines, and I think the first one, I can't remember what order it was, but I believe the first one was just me, like, I got to see a mine. Like, ever since I studied gemology, I just had this desire to go to a mine, like see it, like in this, like from the actual source, and just have that experience. So I just like asked around. I went to Ouro Preto, which is like a little city where like gold originally came from in Brazil. And and like they're known for gems, and they have like topaz mines around. I'm like, how can I go see a topaz mine? And they're like, oh, you just take the bus and like you just go. And I'm like, okay. So I get on the bus and I'm just like walking around, and there's like nobody, and I didn't know what to expect, but like it was very, I don't know, it was there was just like there was nobody. And then I see these guys, and I was asking where the mines were, and they're like, oh yeah, this was it, and it was just like dirt and like hill, like little tunnel things. And then of course they're trying to sell me some gems, and that was it. And it was pretty uneventful. And I was just like, that's a mine? Like, that's not what I was expecting. So that was just me going with like nobody. And I don't think it was even a proper mine, right? So my second experience was at a tourmaline mine, which was a definite, like, there were tunnels that you would go in, and there were workers, and they were shoveling, and it was dark, and they had their torches, and it was like little small, hallways that you had to kind of go through. So that was way more what I was like wanting to like experience and see and learn more from. And then the third one in Brazil was the Emerald Mine, Belmont Emerald. So that was like way more of a production, like that was more established. They actually were at a point where they were changing their process and how they mine. And, there's actually bulldozer, like trucks that are like driving into the mountain. And so that was, again, very different. And then after Brazil was the gold mines in Peru and Colombia, which, as Susan was saying, very different as far as like the safety. And these were fair mines. So, they're more, there's more attention to these things, right? So that was a difference. And then after that, I think it was, I went to a pearl farm. So, that's not really a mine, but it's, a source of, gems, I would say. So, and that was obviously different. A pearl farm, you're on the water. So the whole process is completely different. And then it was Sri Lanka and then Africa, and you have already touched on Africa. So I won't go too much more into it, but overall, what I learned in my experience was just the amount of work, like how hard these people work to get the material that is coming out. And like, I mean, it's like, and then what they have to do with it in order to get this like little thing from it, it's just like such a process. And again, just like the amount of work and how hard these people work, and, sweat, like the conditions, like under such like harsh conditions too. So that was definitely something that I took note of. And, the lack of safety equipment, the lack of, in certain cases of education or knowledge on certain things. But more than those things, what I really gained from my visits at the mine was the connection, like really connecting with the people and like having a conversation. And like, even if we didn't speak the same language, there were just maybe 1 or 2 words that we can kind of like, oh yeah, like I totally get what you're saying, even though you just said 2 words that I understood, but I get that there's just something about the human connection, and like being on that same level and like appreciating each other. And especially this was pretty impactful in the first gold fair mine visit that I went to. We had an opportunity to sit with the miners, and like they asked us questions and we asked them questions, and it was kind of this like workshop kind of thing. And they were so curious about like where the material went, and like the jewelry that was made with the material, you know, like it was just like so special for them to like learn that. And I think that's really the beauty of it. And that's what kind of like spurred the whole Nomad Jeweler and like wanting to build more of those connections with the designer and the miner, because we need each other, and you know, we're like, so we should be there for each other and like support each other in ways that we can. And so that those are some of my experience and what I was able to take away from them.
I will often try to wear a piece of jewelry. Like I'm actually wearing my Susan Wheeler design Fairmine Gold with rough Savorites. And I usually try to wear like these earrings or maybe a ring with a gem that came from that region that's been faceted and set. And I realize I didn't mention it earlier because they're fascinated by like what happens to the gem after the fact. And also many of them are gemologists almost in their own right. Like they may not have the paper degree from GIA, but they know the indicators that they're looking for when they're mining. They can speak eloquently about like what they're finding. I think John Patterson said in the chat, like they love gems as much as we do. I think that was incredibly surprising to me, that like it wasn't just like a means to an end for them. It wasn't just a job. So we always ask them, well, what's your favorite gem? Like what? And it's not always the gem that they're mining. It's like color change garnet, and they'll pull like a wire wrapped piece out or something, like some token, some like one of their favorite stones that they've ever found, or something that's really special to them. It's this universal jewelry connection. It's so amazing to kind of watch that happen, and then to bond over those things. They do love gems, and my stretch goal with Anza would be that it's not just that we're like selling gems and giving back to those communities, but it would be that East Africans are producing their own jewelry and buying that jewelry that comes completely from, you know, materials that might all be sourced on the continent, right? Like, but that they drive and they want to buy their own jewelry, like that to me would be the true measure of success. And not just that they cut it or they process it or whatever it is, but I would love to see them wearing it. And some of them do.
I think taking from what Monica just said, pretty much is I also found out the miners, like they have a certain connection to the gemstones, you know, the way they value it and the way they see it. It's like it's really dear to them, precious to them, even though they don't have the knowledge about, you know, what gem. Most miners don't. They know that stone has value and they can make a living out of it, but they don't know what quality, what it does, where it ends up, you know. So that's one thing I have noticed. And then even though they don't have the knowledge, they still have certain kind of connection and bond with what they're getting out of the ground. They literally worship it, you know, value it, and they know that's a source of their income, and they value it. Is it something they can sell, they can trade, bring, you know, food to the table to their family, to their own, to survival means of. So they have that created a bond for them, and they appreciate it as well. And like what Monica said, it's good to see our own, you know, most mining, I'm not just gonna say specifically in Africa, so many countries have their own resources, you know, they don't use it, they trade it out. It's good to know, to see, you know, that turn into a product and show them what it looks like. And one of the projects I've been working around while I was in Ethiopia. And actually, when I buy usually gemstones, I do buy mine run to benefit the miners, not only for myself, and pick out. And it's very, like Eric mentioned in our last earlier session, to find really nice quality gemstones, it takes like how many kilos, how many pieces, you have to run the dust and the work. That's what also make it really valuable, the rarity and the work in the process from the mining to all the way to, the customer, the consumer hand, and seeing what about the waste, what we're going to do with it. So I've been working in a project like try to, like, if we cannot cut it, and they cannot afford to have that really beautiful pieces or too expensive, they choose to sell it and bring income to themselves and their race to whatever they have left over. Where like we're facing in Ethiopia as well, like with the low grade opals, they don't know what to do with it. So, and other materials, we have a lot of emerald, we have a different kind of materials. That's when I was saying, like, we don't have to necessarily cut it, we can just tumble it, teach young women, young kids great jobs, tumble it, make a simple, nice jewelry. They don't have to be silver, doesn't have to be, gold. It can be wear with strand, so they can see it and value it and have it with them as well. I think that's one thing. I actually, our company is working as a giving back project, and I've been doing that in Ethiopia, and we're gonna be supplying with equipment, especially necessity. The most needed is safety equipment for most miners, including hats, shoes. Some of the stuff can be produced locally in the countries, and torchlights and guidance of safety method of mining. That's what I learned. I mean, they lack all those things, and they literally sacrifice day to day. And I think that's one thing we can contribute as a supplier. And I think most of us, we practice with that as a giving back method, and we'll continue doing that. And our business will support.
You're one busy lady. If you're working on cutting, you're working on this. Like, I really appreciate what you're doing, Hewan. That's really important.
We have to find a means. Cutting is going to take a huge process, like Eric mentioned, and it's not easy to start with. We need experts, we need equipment, we need a huge investment. So we have to start some, small things where we can afford, we can, contribute, and we have to start somewhere, So they are all related, and the safety method is a need, education, it's all linked together. We do where we can, small.
Even I think that's one thing to take away is that even small efforts make a really big impact. So I've kind of made the realization that when I go back, I try to take half of my suitcase is things like plastic baggies, which again, maybe not great environmentally, but it's kind of what they have to work with. And they can be reused and reused and reused. But like things like plastic bags, things like scales, just simple things. I can't, like, is that going to make a huge dent? No, but it's something I can take each time. It's something that we can do each time. And artisanal mining is a way of life. It is an actual income producing, as much as we would like to not have things extracted from the ground, we all work with these things, right? And they have to mine for survival. How do we make it? And in the case of like Moyo and Virtue, like, these are incredibly marginalized. This is not only artisanal mining, but it's like on the fringes of artisanal mining. This is like incredibly marginalized. How do we make things easier or better for them? Mining is going to be a reality, but how do we make it better? How do we make it, better for them so that, and have them participate more fully as well?
I think we've all been talking about different ways that we're doing that with our companies, with Virtue Gem, the project. I was just thinking though about a takeaway of what have I learned at the mine? And I'll just drop one quickly because I know we're coming at time and everyone, might want to do a quick takeaway. I didn't know that women who either, work in mining co-ops or miners left their families for 3 days or more to travel remotely and live in these harsh conditions where sometimes they have to bring water in on motorcycles or bring their own water with them. So I didn't know that people left their families to go to the mine site and work. So that's something I learned at the mines.
That is very true. And like one of our opal supplier, I couldn't fly back to, to the Wallo region at my last trip. The miner hate lady, she has to come all the way to the city for like 2 nights to leave her child behind. My heart was out, like, what was it was me, and I mean, they do think about it. She just came traveling by car, by bus for 2 days just to hand me the opals because I wasn't able to fly. There was a restriction due to the conflict to go to Wallo. And in the past few months, there was no flights to the northern part of Ethiopia. So we couldn't, and I cannot travel with my child who has, risk. And I was like, and she was like committed to do that for me just to hand me the stones, So they do like this, survival means they're going to leave their kids. And she told me they go to sites too. They leave their kids for a day or two, so a lot of things to learn. And that's what make it really valuable for the items we carry, the gemstones we have, all the process and the sacrifices, go through under it, from the mine to all the way here to all the way to our hand, our customers. I think that's what we should appreciate and value. And I think that's what makes really a gemstone when, and especially in a way we're doing it, all of us, and knowing how it comes from the ground to all the way to the market.
Jessica, do you have a takeaway?
Yeah, I think the takeaway, I would just like to see more conversations around the mines and like awareness of what we're talking about. But I mean, you're just going from the fact that this is coming out of the earth too, right? So it's like respect. There's a lot to respect in that, for nature, for people, and how can we be the best stewards of all of that, I think, is a question. And again, the value of these things. So it's not really, I don't know if it can be a takeaway, but just more of like continuing on like what is being seen and what to do, and like moving forward with that.
I would absolutely agree with all points made, and I think what I have seen is that the more you have that interaction, Jessica, like with your tours where you actually bring people from the industry to mines and they have an opportunity to see this, and these initiatives like Virtue and Moyo, where we're connecting, and what the work Hewan is doing too is connecting the miners much more closely to the end, the end producer, the end consumer, and really shortening that, and the incredible conversations and the incredible learning that happens on both sides when the miner is connecting a lot more closely with kind of the end producer, I think is really, we're seeing a shift, and I hope we see more of that, because I think the easier it gets to tell the stories of the value of what actually comes out of the ground, and the incredibly hard human work that has to happen for that piece of jewelry to happen. So the more the retailers, designers, and consumers can kind of see where the gems come from, I think the more we benefit in us being able to maybe help them, and also in them being able to kind of teach us, and we have to be humble enough to kind of learn those lessons. So
I agree. I think that's learning. We're always learning those lessons every time we go. I hope to go back to some mines soon, and so much more to learn.
Yeah, I agree. And everything that everybody shared. And we have so much to learn, for sure. I'm grateful for what we have learned, but there's more.
There's more to learn. Maybe
Yeah.
as new minerals discovered, going to new sites.
Yeah.
I would both love to travel again. That would be great.
We will soon.
Yes. Hewan, I'm glad you're back safely, and you just got back in the States after spending some more quality time in Ethiopia, but such a pleasure to share the stage with you guys and tell the stories. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks
Thank
for joining. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.